Joining us, the Environment Secretary George Eustice. Hi.
Good morning.
Good to see you as always. Thanks for joining us on the programme. Start with cost of living, should we? Last time you were on, you were talking about people buying value brands from supermarkets in order to try to make ends meet a little bit easier. This morning, hearing from the Bank for International Settlements saying that we're on the tipping point of falling into a period of runaway inflation. What else can people at home do?
Well, look, we've got inflationary pressures right around the world, in the United States, the European Union, and, of course, here in the UK as well. So the truth is that a lot of prices are covered by the gas price. And so when gas prices spike, we get a big increase in fertiliser costs, fuel costs, and that goes right through people's household bills. So there's a limit to what we can do until the gas price comes down. But we have announced a very, very big package of support now, £37 billion, giving £650 extra to the poorest households in this country and an extra £300 a year to pensioners as well, to give them a boost to their incomes. We've increased the national living wage. So we've done a lot of measures to try to help mitigate the impacts of this. But there's no doubt that when you get a surge in oil and gas prices, it is going to put pressure on household budgets.
PM suggested moving away from green fuels. That's a way forward. He is suggesting to tackle the cost of living crisis. Repurposing land currently used for crop-based biofuels to grow more food. Is that something that you support?
Yes, it is something that we are arguing for at the G7 this week. And that's because if you reduce the amount of particularly maize and wheat that is going into biofuels, which is used as part of the blends in petrol, when people see E10 on those petrol pumps, that suggests that up to 10% of the fuel could be a biofuel coming from those crops. If we could temporarily reduce the amount of biofuels going into the petrol pumps, that actually does bring back down the price of maize in particular quite significantly.
Washington thinks it's a terrible idea.
Well, Washington and the United States are heavily invested in biofuels, and they see that, therefore, as part of their fuel security. But what we'd be talking about here is a temporary reduction in order to stabilise world food prices and make sure that the poorer countries around the world can get access to the food that they need. So we think it's the right thing to do. But it is the case, of course, that the United States is a big player in biofuels, so we're going to have to work to try to get them on board. Well,
they're not going to, are they? In fact, they're trying to block any change that the Prime Minister might come up with at G7.
Well, it doesn't. We should still argue for the right thing, whether or not.
But they think they're arguing for the right thing as well.
Well, they disagree with it because they are thinking as well about their fuel supply, and they see this as a big part of that, and they're worried about what might happen to fuel at the fuel pumps. We think that's misplaced. We think that actually you could do this temporarily. It would temporarily increase the amount of wheat and maize on world markets, and would therefore bring food prices down. So we've done the analysis on this. We think it's the right thing to do. They've obviously got a slightly different view at the moment, but that's why you have these international dialogues to thrash out these differences and discuss it.
Yeah, but you can't persuade somebody about your point of view if you don't actually turn up for meetings that they're organising. The Prime Minister didn't go to a meeting that Biden was hosting.
Well, the Prime Minister is going to be at the meeting this week. There's a meeting happening at Bavaria, and then there's a NATO meeting later in the week in Spain as well. There's been a lot of international engagement. Obviously, he's coming from the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, and I'm sure that if the Prime Minister wasn't there would have been somebody else attending that meeting in his place.
How are we going to get the grain out of Ukraine?
Well, this is a big challenge. There's probably around 25 million tonnes of grain, possibly more, that is currently stranded in stores around Odessa. And to put that into context, at any one time, we've got about 250 million tonnes of wheat in store around the world. And so, although it's a small proportion of the overall total, in the current context, it's quite significant. And unless we can get it out, there won't be stores for this year's harvest to go into. So we're looking at what we can do to help to repair railways, to look at a land bridge so that we can get that wheat out across a land border. It's now very, very perilous to try to get ships into the Black Sea and to take it out.
So we're ruling out the Navy being involved?
It's very difficult to do that because the area is mined, and in fact, Ukraine themselves have closed their ports for security reasons. And so there's a whole host of reasons why it's difficult to get shipping into the Black Sea and to take that wheat out of Odessa. But we are looking at what we can do to support them to make sure they can get it out. And the other, very sad thing that we're seeing is that Russia, it appears, are stealing some wheat from those stores. And so what the UK government is doing is making available the technology that we've got to be able to test the provenance of wheat. We're working with other countries, including Australia, on this, so that we can ensure that stolen Ukrainian wheat does not find a route to market.
OK, how do we do that?
You can test the DNA of the grain, and we've got samples of Ukrainian grain. We did a lot of work on this. You might remember the horse meat scandal about a decade ago. The UK is a world leader in being able to test the provenance. That's the precise region in which a crop was grown through a testing of DNA. And that's what we've made available. We're putting on the table £1.5 million to support that work. OK. Are we inviting President Zelensky to address Parliament? I haven't heard that, but obviously he's addressed Parliament before.
No, actually to come along and do that.
Well, I'm sure that he would be welcome to. I haven't heard plans for that. Obviously, that's something that the Speaker of the House would lead on that type of.
So that's just the Prime Minister flying a kite at the moment, then.
Well, look, Zelensky has already spoken to Parliament before.
Yeah, we saw.
He addressed it virtually. I'm sure that President Zelensky, at the moment, has got quite a lot on his plate dealing with the current situation in Ukraine. But, of course, I'm sure that he'd be welcome to come and address our Parliament. I'm sure that the Speaker of the House would accommodate that if that were the right thing to do. But it's very early to be considering that at the moment.
But I'm guessing you are talking to him about how a land bridge would work to try and get this grain out.
We are working with, Ukraine on what it would take to ensure that they can get some of that wheat out of Odessa and into world markets where it should be. What do we want Turkey to do to try and help with that? Well, Turkey's obviously got a role to play. It's a player in the, in the region and in the Black Sea. Yes, there are discussions there as well. It's a difficult situation because a lot of the rail infrastructure has been damaged through the war. It's been attacked by the Russians. And it's also, as I said, evidence that the Russians are stealing the wheat and actually taking it east. And we just need to make sure that we can try to get that rail infrastructure back so that we can export. But you acknowledge that it's a matter of life and death for some countries. We were in Somaliland last week showing that unless this grain gets there, then people are literally going to starve to death. Well, a really important thing in a situation like this is for the rest of the world to keep their markets open. And that's why Europe, the UK, the US are all absolutely committed to keeping world markets open. Because, as I said, there's around 250 million tonnes of wheat in store around the world. And provided world markets remain open, we'll be able to get wheat to some of those North African countries that have been traditionally quite reliant on Ukraine. But it's very important that the world doesn't turn in on itself and put in place export bans. We need those international grain markets to function as intended. OK. Talk to me about the Northern Ireland Protocol. The first vote on the protocol from MPs later on today. I think we'll get the result this evening. We had the EU ambassador to the UK on Sophie's programme, I think, yesterday, saying the move is illegal and unrealistic and talks of a trade war and retaliation. Is it really worth it? Well, the reality is that we needed to do something in this space. We've been talking with the European Union now for some time about making the provisions of the Northern Ireland Protocol work effectively. The difficulty we've had is that the European Union have said we're not allowed to change our mandate. Member states have said we're not allowed to have an opinion on this. It's reserved to the European Union. And there's been this circular problem with the European Union just refusing to revisit their mandate. And at some point, therefore, you have to take matters into your own hands and to clarify in law what the Northern Ireland Protocol means. And that's what we're doing with this bill. And it's important that we do that because we have some temporary grace periods in place where we're not implementing all of the full checks and not requiring export health certificates and so on. And it's crucial that those remain because, ultimately, Northern Ireland is part of the UK. It's part of our internal market. And you can't have a situation where things like the sale of sausages from GB to Northern Ireland is outlawed, or that seed potatoes from Scotland are not allowed to be sold in Northern Ireland. It's a nonsense, and so we have to address it. What's changed since we did the deal? If we start breaking deals that we've signed, sealed and delivered, then why would other countries want to do a deal with us? Well, we're not breaking an agreement. We're bringing clarity to how it should be interpreted. And so the Northern Ireland Protocol always had provisions for what they called the specialised committees. to iron out points of detail and to work on those remaining very, very technical issues. So whether a seed potato from Scotland can be authorised to be sold, there's established mechanisms for that. But look, this is the problem. The European Union has refused to even consider that or refer it to their technical committee.
Seeking clarity after the deal's already done, you can't do that.
No, you can, because it was always envisaged.
Well, not according to the EU. They say that it's illegal, unrealistic, and it's going to be a trade war. Well,
that's not correct. What's legal is what Parliament deems legal through the legislation that it passes. Now, obviously, we would still rather that the EU did what they ought to have done many months ago, change their mandate, sort out their position, talk to their own member states about what they should be doing here, and then actually come back to the table and work out how to make that Northern Ireland Protocol work. But in the absence of that, what we will do, and we can absolutely give them this guarantee, we will protect the interests of the EU single market in the way we legislate. So we're talking about having red lanes and green lanes so that goods destined only for Northern Ireland won't need checks, but they will stay in Northern Ireland.
Think about this before?
Goods that are going on to the single market would still have those checks. So that gives the European Union all of the reassurance that they need for their own single market.
I thought this deal was oven ready.
It was a complete deal, but there were remaining technical details, as I said, over often quite banal things like the technical way that you regulate and allow access for things like seed potatoes and particular varieties of tree.
Sure, but
these are small things that were there to be resolved after, and the EU's not resolved.
But do you think that the EU would go into a trade war over banal detail?
No, I don't. I think it would be a very foolish thing for them to do. And
so they obviously think it's more than banal detail.
Well, I think what they need to do is revise their mandate and re-engage in discussions from a meaningful basis, having talked to their own member states. That's what we would like them to do. In the absence of that, obviously it falls to the UK government to determine the correct legal interpretation of the law.
By changing the law?
By by implementing an Act of Parliament that gives us the ability to derogate from elements of it where necessary in order to make it work.
Breaking international law is what the EU say.
Well, we don't accept that because there are circumstances where you can actually do this. And we're talking here not about derogating from the main principles of the Northern Ireland Protocol, that principle that there should be no border on the island of Ireland, that there should be unfettered trade between GB and Northern Ireland, that remains in place. And we will protect the interests of the European Union's own single market by having those red lanes and full checks on those goods, so they've nothing to worry about in that regard. We will look after their interests in the way we legislate through the Northern Ireland.
Do you think the Prime Minister has the full support of his cabinet at the moment?
Yes.
Well, apart from the one that resigned last week.
Of course. And so Oliver Dowden has resigned, and he resigned.
So he was an outlier and there's no others?
Well, he resigned, and the way that collective government works, as you know, is that those who are in the cabinet, yes, we have our full support. We work as a team. We have the support of the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has our support. We work together. And, we stick together through difficult times. And so even when, yes, you have very disappointing election results, as we undoubtedly did last Thursday, we got an important agenda that we're working on, and that's what we're all focused on.
OK. How do we feel about our future kin receiving cash in a suitcase from a Qatari sheikh?
Look, I've seen these reports, and I don't have a particular view on it. Provided this is all accounted for properly, then obviously that's something. It's something for the royal family to look at. It's going to be
reinvestigated by the Charity Commission.
Yes, and obviously there'll be that investigation, and it's something for them to look at. But It's not something while an investigation's going on for me to comment on.
Well, he was previously chastised by a High Court judge for calling on the very same sheikh to intervene in the development of Chelsea Barracks. How wise is it, given that happened and he was chastised by a High Court judge a decade ago, is it to accept bags full of cash?
Look, I don't know the details of this, and I've only seen the news reporting. We don't know how true that news reporting was, or whether there were exaggerations.
They've acknowledged that they received the cash.
Whether he physically took a bag of money. So we don't know any of that, and that's obviously.
Did?
Well, there's obviously an investigation that the Charity Commission has said they're going to run. Let's let that run its course. OK. Just talk to me before I let you go about suggestions by Nicola Sturgeon, friend of your government, of course, suggesting that if Margaret Thatcher was still in power, there would have been a second Indie referendum by now. Well, I don't think that's right, and I don't think we should have a second referendum now. We had a referendum not long ago, just in 2014. It gave a clear result. And I think the really important thing is there's bigger issues that we need to work on. We've got all of these global pressures as we're coming out of the pandemic. That's what we should be focused on. There's too much else going on in the world at the moment to be having another referendum.
OK, it's good to talk to you as always. Thanks very
Thank you
much
very
indeed for
much.
joining us.